Good evening. She beat Labour in the last election, but what are her chances this time round? And can she hold on to the Christchurch Central seat for another term? Tonight, Nikki Wagner joins me, and Lynched starts right now. Thanks for joining us. National MP Nikki Wagner shortly, but first, this week's memo to Christchurch. So what are we doing to support local industry right here in Canterbury? We've all heard the Buy New Zealand Made campaign, but what about our fellow Cantabs? Are we giving them the support they need to make an effort to keep them in business right here in Christchurch? The answer, I hope, is yes. There are hundreds of local companies here who have done it tough over the past few years but are still battling on, and good on them for sticking around. If you want to know more about these businesses, there are plenty of fantastic websites that support only locally made products right here in this city. It's these businesses that make all the difference to our community. Case in point, on News Talk ZB, I asked a simple question. It was really simple too. Where and what is your favourite bakery? Well, the response was simply overwhelming. There were a few callers who named companies for their good, excellent food and tasty pies, etc. But it was the stories behind the bakeries that made the difference. Many chose to shop at certain places because they are locally owned, family owned and operated. Now, despite my local Countdown not being owned by New Zealanders, that doesn't bother me in the slightest, not at all. I'll still shop there. It's cheap, it's easy and it's close by. But recently I challenged myself to buy fruit and vegetables at the local grocer, and it is cheaper. Countdown is never going to go out of business, but there's every chance the local man down the road will if we don't support him and ultimately his family. So here's this week's challenge to you. Find your local market and give it a go. It just might be worth it in the end. And that's this week's memo to Christchurch. Now to this week's guest. She's the MP for Christchurch Central after winning the usually safe Labour seat in 2011, only by about 40 or so votes, wasn't it? 47, oh, there you go. She's put her hat back in the ring and wants another chance as the MP for Christchurch Central. But what are her chances? Nikki Wagner joins me. Thanks for your time. Yep. What are your chances, do you think? Because there was a perception out there was a bit of dilly-dally going around and you couldn't really decide whether it was worth it, but you thought, I'm giving it another go. Why did you have to stall about this? What made you think, do I really want this again? Because you did take your time, didn't you? I
took my time because being an MP is a really tough job and you've got to really want it. You've got to really work hard and you've got to really like people. I've been there for 12 years because even though I only went into Parliament in 2005, I started standing there in 2002. But yes, I really want to win the seat. I think I can. And I think the reason is that I'm local, I'm absolutely committed and I'm deeply connected to that constituency, to that electorate. I live right in the centre city. And if I think back on it, over the last 12 years, I've learned a lot. I've got a lot of knowledge, but mostly I've made really good networks, both in Christchurch Central and in Wellington. And I know how to use those networks to make things happen. I can get results. And I think that's what Christchurch Central needs. And it actually wouldn't matter how good a new MP is, they just can't, it would take them 2 to 3 years to get up to speed to make things happen, and we don't have that time.
Do you think you stand a stronger chance now that you know that Tony Milner's up against you for Labour? What do you rate his chances? Do you know much about him?
Well, he's a nice young man. But truly, you need to be connected, you need to know the people that can make things happen, you need to understand the networks, and you need to really work hard for the people of Christchurch Central. And I live there.
You're in a difficult position, aren't you? Because there is that perception out there that Christchurch City is unique in terms of other cities around New Zealand, and that it has been quite a Labour stronghold in the past. You have your work cut out for you, don't you, in terms of EQC issues, in terms of insurance issues. It's easy to say Nikki Wagner's not doing enough for the people of Christchurch. How do you respond to that? Because you probably know what I'm getting at, don't you?
Well, you can only work 24/7, and that's all I do. I mean, I've been questioned about the number of cases I've taken to EQC.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. How many have you taken to EQC?
467. So that's a large number of cases, and all those cases we've had some result out of it. So I went back to them, I've talked to them, and that's only the EQC cases.
So what do you think you failed to get that media traction then? Because there is the perception out there in the community, with all due respect, that you're not visible enough.
Well, I think I put my head down and get on with it. You know, there's some people who talk a lot and some people who take action. You speak to anyone in Christchurch Central who's been to my office and they'll tell you they've had a good experience, that they've been well looked after and they've had a good result. I work really hard for my people and I really care about them.
How do you say that to them, though, the critics out there that say you're not?
Well, everybody likes to criticise, and in an election year they're going to criticise even more. I can live with myself, I can sleep straight in bed, I know what I do, and I'm going to keep on doing it.
Let's talk about the residential rebuild. There's been a lot of flack over the lack of rebuilding going on in, well, most of Christchurch, to be fair. And there is this notion that it's all very well to have a 100-day blueprint for Central City, which, you know, looks great, it's the Disneyland approach we've always wanted, but where was the 100-day blueprint for the residents? And it's too easy to say we're waiting for insurance issues, isn't it?
Well, the difference between the CBD blueprint and residential is that people were tending to build back on their land. So there wasn't the decisions that we had for the rebuild. In terms of the blueprint, we needed to identify the anchor projects so people knew where to cluster their new businesses.
But
so
there's
we had to put that down.
That no one, on talkback, when I talk about the anchor projects and the CBD rebuild, there's a perception out there that residents just don't give a stuff. They want their houses fixed. They want the EQC issues done. Their insurance issues completed. Yeah. They're not getting that done.
Yeah, there's two things we have to do here. We actually have to do both. Certainly the residential is the first priority. And of course we had 8,000 red zone houses, then they've had to go somewhere else. But if you look at what EQC's done, for example, they've repaired over 51,000 homes. Now that's the size of Napier. They're working their way through that. That's 2/3 of them repaired. They expect to have the rest finished by the end of the year. Whether they'll get the whole lot done or not, but
how do you rate
pretty
EQC's
close.
Performance?
Well, things are difficult. I think you talk to one person, they'll say they're fantastic. You talk to someone else, they say they're terrible. And I think, remember...
How do you rate their performance, though? How do you rate
Well, they didn't come to me for years and years, for months and months and months.
You were on the VIP list?
No, I was not on the VIP list.
But you're a politician, Nikki Wagner.
Yeah, well, that's what I said to them afterwards. I said, look, I defend you every single day. You should be looking after my house.
In all honesty, how do you rate their performance? Give it to me in the last 7 or so months. Have they got better?
Yes, I think they have got better, and even the people who decry them say that they've got better. But I just put it this way. I talk to the people from EQC every day. Every single person as an individual is giving it its best shot, but the big picture is not good enough. I agree with that.
When we return, I want to discuss the Southern No Response protest group. They're still protesting hard about this, Nikki Wagner. That's next, right here on Lynched on CTV. Welcome back to Lynched. Nikki Wagner is my guest. Nikki, the Southern No Response people, it seems like they're going through hell. And I feel for them, because why should they have to now start employing lawyers to work on their behalf to take this company, essentially a government-run agency, to court? They're taking the people who are essentially responsible for them and their well-being to court. That just seems wrong.
Well, I agree. I think lawyers is always a bad start. Going to court never gives us a really good answer. And we've had a few cases that have already made things even more difficult for us. For example, the apportionment cases that went through court when the insurance company took EQC to court. And that's required every single case to be apportioned separately. They've had 200 people doing individual apportionments for each claim. So that's just slowed everything down. So I think the trouble with courts is that they can't have any flexibility about the decisions that they make. And in this case, a lot of these decisions would be better to be made collaboratively and working together and getting an answer out of it.
So why can't these residents work with Southern Response? It seems...
Well, there's a lot of money involved, and I think when there's a lot of money involved, sometimes things get pretty tight and it's very difficult to negotiate. And of course, we live in a democracy. So the ultimate end game is that if you don't like what's out there, you can go to court. And that's what it's all about.
But sadly, this all comes down to money, as you say.
Well,
they're having to now find the funds to take a class case.
Is not a good answer. but it's always their choice to do that.
How do you rate Peter Rose's performance during all of this, the CEO of Southern Response?
Well, again, he's been out there up front. I had somebody in my office this morning saying that they're in that Southern Response, and they're saying that they've actually been working with a case manager. They're now getting through their cases. She rings and says that I'll be there, I'll give you a call in a week's time. They know where they're up to. They're developing a trust with Southern Response. So again, I think it's individual. I think he tries really hard. I think lots of people won't think he hasn't done a particularly good job for them.
Let's talk about the council books.
Yes.
They don't look flash.
No.
Even with the Quarter-Mentha report, regardless of that, we knew the council was in a bad situation.
Yes.
The rate's going up 6.5%. Leanne Dalzell has alluded to the fact that nothing is off limits when it comes to the potential sale of assets. She's made that quite clear. Nothing, everything's on the table. Do you think if we're to try and fund these anchor projects, then perhaps looking at some of our core assets is a way to go? Get rid of them, put them on the chopping block?
Well, the thing about the anchor projects, it's about $4.8 billion worth of it. The Crown is putting in $3 billion, the Council's putting $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion and over a length of time, because
it's a lot of money for projects that don't make money, though.
Well, it's
That's
a
the
huge
concern
amount of
ratepayers
project.
have, don't they?
But you've got to think about what the Crown's paying for. The Crown is paid for all the red zoning, it's paid for the frame, it's paid for the river, re-engineering of the river, it's paying for the whole convention centre, it's paying for the whole justice precinct. Now, the things that the council are paying for is the Performing Arts Centre, most of the Performing Arts Centre, the Metro Sports area, and the third one is the town halls as part of the performance centre.
No one would doubt they're not great projects, but how are we going to pay for them?
But the point I'm making, and the stadium. Now, the Crown has already put in a temporary stadium. All those things can be put in a length of time. I think the Metro Sports is really important to get it straight away, because I think people need that exercise and recreation. Yeah. So that's the first thing. So they've got to pay for that. The other two, they've got a bit more movement in time, and they need to make their decisions up. Are they going to sell? Are they going to put it on the rates? What are they going to do? And they need to ask their
What do you think they should do?
I think they need to ask their ratepayers.
You're a ratepayer, you tell me.
I'm happy for them to sell some of the assets, particularly the ones that don't generate any income.
Like what?
Well, I don't know what they want to sell. They say they've got some land that they don't use. They've said that there's some things that they don't think are going to
the bus company, get rid of it?
Yeah, well, a bus company, do they need to own a bus company?
I'm asking.
Exactly.
City care?
Maybe.
The airport?
I'd like to see it all. They have had this discussion.
The airport?
Well, I don't know how much of the airport do they own. Not the whole lot of it. That's an asset that actually makes them an income, so they've got to weigh that up as well.
So wouldn't the council be wrong to sell
Well, they have to weigh that
shares?
up. They have to weigh that up.
What do you think?
I think they should weigh it up. I don't know the figures as such. I think that, well, I think they've got shares in the port company.
The question.
No, because I would not answer the question unless I had it in black and white in front of me, and then I would sit down and say, yes, I think we should keep that. Yes, I can live without that. But without it in black and white, without knowing the figures, they don't even know the figures at this stage. How can you possibly make a decision?
That's true, they don't. You're correct to say that's why they're hiring yet more consultants to sort that out.
Yeah. So you've got to know, you've got to have some facts to actually make a decision on.
A 6.5% rate increase, is that doable in a broken city with residents still doing it tough?
Well, one of the things is, of course, is that quite a lot of properties have been upvalued too, so that's going to hurt some more. Although
that will, won't it? Because the council keeps saying that, don't worry about things, you know.
The argument is that they say how much money and then they spread it across. So as long as everybody's gone up, it's not going to be any more for those particular ones. So yeah, so I don't know if that's the point, but we've always been taught, you know, if your house is worth more, you pay more rates.
Is that fair?
That's the way it works in New Zealand.
But is it fair?
Well, a lot of people don't think so. A lot of people say they've got a very big house, but actually they only have one rubbish bag and they only have one lot of sewer and not so much water coming in. But it's always been a type of tax, our rates. It's not just for services.
While we're talking about the council, how do you rate Leanne Dalzell's performance since she's took office?
Well, I think she's working really hard, and I think she's got a really difficult job with a lot of new councillors, and they've got to work their way through that process of how to work together, first of all, but also they still haven't got a CEO, and they're still working on their consenting department. So they've got a lot of things that's making it even more difficult.
Isn't it time to get a CEO now? Can you not believe they still can't find one? How hard is it?
Well, apparently they're going through the process.
Got any mates that might want to?
No, do you want to bet?
Well, it's good money, isn't it? I wouldn't mind if it was
I
good
think
money.
it's a pretty big job too.
But let's talk about, in terms of Leanne's performance so far, did she handle the floods okay? Has the council handled last month's floods okay, for example?
There's big problems with the floods. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of the geotech of the city, because the main issue really is that the estuary has tilted up nearly 0.5 metre. So if you imagine that where the water goes up, it's
Yeah.
higher. So everything's going to pool as it goes back. And then there's a lot of broken infrastructure, and then there's a lot of heave in the bottom of the stream beds. So there's a lot of cleaning up that has to be done to get that out, and I think that they were caught short with the Flockton Basin the first time round.
Why were they caught short though? Because they knew this was an issue for years, didn't they?
Well, it has been an issue for years, and if you go back through the history, it used
1983
to
or 4, it flooded extensively.
40s, 50s, 60s. It wasn't until really the late 60s that they had the drainage board that they actually managed to clear it up properly. People were used to it before then.
But the earthquakes made it worse, though, didn't they?
It has made it worse.
The earthquakes
yes.
have made many parts of the city simply stuffed.
Simply because the rivers have changed course and they've risen, and quite often they've risen and the land has dropped. So it's made a significant difference. And as I say, the estuaries made it more difficult. So it pools. So you've really got to have it working really efficiently, and you've got to have everything moving as fast as you possibly can. And I think they did a really good job this weekend to make sure that everything was cleaned up, all the trees and everything else that could stop it.
We don't
was
have long
gone.
this section, but what do we do about the Flockton Basin? We can't allow it to keep flooding.
Yep.
Doesn't this just come down to cost? Can we afford to raise the homes? Can we afford to fix the drains? Or do we just have to say, you know what, you're red zoned?
Well, they've got 2 or 3 options to what they can actually do there. Mike Galuli, who's the drainage, City Council drainage engineer, has been working on that for a long time, and he says he's going to bring his plan to the council by the end of the month. There's 2 or 3 ways of doing it. Actually, this whole city was a swamp, and we've managed to drain that pretty well. And the Flockton Basin isn't as bad as some of the other parts of the city. For example, up in the Cranford Street Basin is much lower. So, yeah, I think it can be fixed.
But to be fair, places like Heathcote, they've always flooded.
Yes, they have, and they've got worse. You know, just looking at the Heathcote flooding last time, it's flooded in a slightly different way.
Okay.
And so you just have to figure out what it is and fix it.
We need to take a break. After the break, more from Nikki Wagner, your feedback, social media that's trending this week, and some comments on customer service, or not, in Christchurch. Stay with us. Welcome back. My guest is Nikki Wagner. Nikki, let's just discuss the floods. I want to continue with this for a little bit longer. The Flockton Basin, you say there's a couple of options. Is one serious option to red zone the area? Because by all accounts, it sounds like it's going to be an expensive and long task to fix the area, and residents don't want to wait another 2 years for council, for governments to get it sorted. What is your response to that?
Well, as I say, the City Council engineers have been working on 2 or 3 options, I think, and there are various amounts of money from 10 to 30 to $50 million, something like that. But EQC is also working quite closely with them, and I think there may be some cross-reference of what EQC can do and what the City Council can do as well, and come up with an option that's going to work quite well. Yes, the timing is an issue. I mean, as we saw this weekend, if you keep everything clean and you watch it and you don't get things jammed up, it can drain away quite well. There was no water there at all. I drove through it several times during the weekend and it was fine, no problem at all. And as I say, it's not, if you look at the maps of Christchurch, it's not an area that should be as badly flooding as it is.
Final few moments left. How badly do you want the Christchurch Central seat again?
Very.
How badly?
I will be working as hard as I possibly can. I will be asking everybody that I have worked with before in the past to support me, and I will be doing everything I can, both in Christchurch and in Wellington, to make sure the people of Christchurch want me to be there for the next 3 years.
What is your message to those who, and you know this is what I'm going to ask, who say you haven't been visible enough in the community? What is your response to that? Is this just a Labour attack? Is this a cheap political shot?
I think it's a cheap shot. I do not think you could find an MP who has spent more time in their electorate than I do. I am there constantly. I live in the centre of the electorate.
But you stayed in Parliament when the floods were happening. Why was that?
Because we have to keep the quorum in Parliament. I think people don't necessarily understand what the responsibilities of parliamentarians are. Firstly, you have to stay in Parliament, otherwise Parliament goes down, particularly if you're a government MP. But of course I came down as soon as I could and have spent the time there ever since.
Nikki Wagner, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me on Lynched. And you weren't lynched, were you?
Well, I don't know. I'll have a look later.
Thanks for your time, really appreciate it. Nikki Wagner, everybody. Well, to feedback now, we all know that the flu season has arrived, hasn't it? And there's already been a few reported cases right here at Christchurch Public Hospital. I asked you earlier this week on Facebook whether or not you believe in the flu injection. I still can't make up my mind. Plenty of feedback. Let's take a look at that feedback now. Lorna Bray had a very bad case of the flu a few years ago, which ended up in pneumonia. My doctor gave me a flu vaccine, and since then, I've never had a bad flu. That was 20 odd years ago. Carol Reed says, I believe in gymnastics? No. Building up your system with good food, vitamins, garlic, echinacea and vitamin C, so if it comes along, your body fights it off. Never had it and not going to. Danielle writes, I had it a few years ago, got very sick, was the worst. Then I actually did have the flu, haven't had it since and haven't had the flu. Shannon Burrow writes, always get it and never get much more than the cold, except this year. I missed it, got my son done last year too, and it was the first year he wasn't on antibiotics. The vaccine can't actually give you the flu as it's not a live vaccine, which is a good point, isn't it? You get the flu vaccine?
Always get the flu vaccine. Can't afford to be sick because I've got to be out in my electorate.
Nicely done. I'm too scared to get it myself, but I will. Well, thank you so much for all your feedback. Keep it coming. Head to facebook.com/Lynched. So, what is trending this week on social media that's got you clicking? Take a look at this.
Do it. Reuse old materials to create new things such as these glass bottle lamps and credit card guitar picks. Hack your life with simple tricks such as using a hair straightener to iron your collar. Stack your clothes vertically to see them all at once. Use a bread tab to hold your spot on a roll of tape. Matt demonstrates how he uses an Arduino to make a celebrity silencer for your TV. By decoding the closed caption track and the video signal, the Arduino is able to look for keywords such as Miley Cyrus, Kim Kardashian or Paul Henry and mute your TV. See it. Here are a collection of top pictures from 2013. Strangers were asked to kiss for the first time.
Justin,
Elizabeth,
how are you?
Nice to
Shall we
meet
make
you.
out?
Absolutely.
Ready for love. Can you be ready?
That was a good one. I'm sorry.
The owner doesn't allow their dog on the bed. Dream it. Designer Fabienne Felder wants to reupholster jumbo jets with moss. In her vision, passengers will sit on verdant tufts while bryophytes purify the air and use electrons captured during photosynthesis to power the TV panels on the seat backs. The scientists are researching the potential of photomicrobial fuel cells transforming sunlight into electricity that can power iPads. Lynched 1 is an interactive lamp controlled by the movements of your hand. Wave your hand over it to turn it on or off, or move your hand up and down to change the brightness. Developed to be worn as a bracelet, this computer concept is constructed out of a flexible OLED touchscreen. It would have features such as a holographic projector and pull-out extra keyboard panels.
Nicely done. Well, finally tonight, the skin cream people at the malls in Christchurch are up to their old tricks again. Chances are you would have come across them. They're usually rude, they're usually over the top. They sell you skin cream products you don't need at the little kiosks. You know the ones I mean, don't you? They attack you by jumping in front of you with their hand out. Would you like something free? They say, you know the ones, the free samples. These salespeople use the basic principles of influence and coercion by giving you something for free, which makes you feel like you have to return the favour by listening to their rubbish. They only employ physically attractive people, and studies show we believe more of what they say when a beauty product is sold to us by a physically more attractive person. Nothing wrong with that. But from what I've observed, they prey on the elderly and sometimes extremely vulnerable, those who find it hard to say no, and those who probably don't need these skin cream products in the first place. Their overly touchiness, you know, it's downright absurd, and they make you feel like you're $1 million, but it's rubbish, isn't it? But if you see these people in the malls and you think they're annoying you, or annoying customers, or they're preying on the vulnerable, give the management a call there. The last thing they want is people on their premises making customers feel easy. And just a quick note, Jarvis, our cameraman, spent $120 on 2 for the price of 1. That is our show this week. Good night.